Hello, hello. This is Catherine Buckaloo, and you're listening to Truth Connections Radio. We are broadcasting from UPRN 107.7 FM, the Paranormal Radio Network, and TruthConnections.com. Thank you all very much for being here. It has been said that an enlightened being plays with the universe the way a child plays with a ball. Tonight's guest is James Evans Bomar, also known as Seven. Specializing in linguistics, etymology, and ciphering, he extracts the esoteric meaning within the language. Having spent years in deep study diving through symbolism, occult symbols, geometry, he has become an expert in defining what is behind the veil. Seven is an independent researcher, public speaker, host of his own internet radio television program called Astral Quest, and he has a special affinity for functions of the inner body, or as he likes to call it, the inner verse. His research in bioenergetics, water, and frequency has also yielded invaluable experimental data. In this episode, we will discuss our own limitless potential to harness our abilities to expand our consciousness and break free of programmed behavior patterns that were designed to divide, so we can activate our highest mind, body, and spirit potential. Please help me welcome Seven Bomar to the show. Welcome, Seven.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Wow, amazing. I think I'm definitely going to have to get your permission to use that that advancement of the bio. I've been waiting to sit down and do it myself. I've just been so tied up, but just thank you for such a beautiful introduction. And it definitely holds true to what exactly is going on and what I'm about and what the network that I'm involved in is about. And so today, as we always introduce something more massive than before, I feel very fortunate to be able to share that on Truth Connections, because it is the real Truth Connection today.
Thank you, Seven. We're very grateful that you came on the show today with us. Thank you for being here.
Indeed.
Would you like to begin by telling us, the audience, a little bit about your journey?
For sure, yeah. I'll definitely, as I always say, I have to give these introductions about myself, and it's really the most uncomfortable time for me in the recording. I'm sure I probably could do it a lot better at the end. But I will just start by saying that I'm just like everyone else in the sense that as a child, I had the curiosity, the fire, the will, and the passion to continue to expand and to grow. And what I've done in order to reset clocks and time and season and all this is I've allowed that growth to continue. And so my growth in life has been in successions of spiritual progression, that I've become aware of things through certain sequences and circumstances within my life that I'm now sharing with other individuals, and also and that's also being done in real time. And the core, what I would say, the core power source of this particular idea is what happens after death. Is there energy, free energy, especially for the body? Is there another stage of consciousness that we can reach? Do we have abilities? Do we have powers? What is our history? What is our real story? Because obviously the organism shows that it's been around for millions of years, even beyond time. And to also, more than anything, though, get the factual data about all of this. Not to really sit around and stay stuck in one belief system or an idea that may have holes in it, but to find something that is solid. And that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. A quest for knowledge is what brings a lot of us to the table,
Indeed.
To the truth table. I would like to begin talking about some of these alignments that have been happening. I know in late December, everyone was confronted with their egos, if you will. And now with this Grand Cross alignment, and the energy from that is very intense, and a lot of people are agitated. It seems like it's amplified times 100 or 1,000 even. But I like to try to look at it as an opportunity to learn and to rise above many issues that have been holding us back as individuals.
Indeed.
How would you like to look at it?
Well, just to understand alignments completely, alignments have everything to do with pole shifts, and that's why the big advertisement of the alignment, which was I think the 2012 alignment, also came with the notion of a pole shift also taking place. If you remember, the information was always tied in together. There's going to be alignment and then the great pole shift. Okay, so this is the most current information that you'll find factual that shows you that alignments are connected to pole shifts. So obviously, as you get deeper into it, you figure out there's alignments all the time. You can even cause alignments. But the ones that are more popular, like the Grand Cross and then the one in December as you're speaking of, what happens with an individual is that they generally experience the antithesis to what they're currently, what frequency they're currently on, because this is obviously a system of harmonics, the Earth. It's developed in a dual system or a duality, a 0 and a 1. So for every reaction, there's an action. And so what happens is when you remain polarized, as the term actually means, is indicating, you either stay on the left or you stay on the right side of your consciousness. And so thus, when there is a shift, you often experience adverse things, or what they say, diametrically opposed things begin to occur in your life, right? That just, this is not right. And this is what also makes you notice these alignments a lot more than anything else. They have a way of agitating us. And so what happens, though, is that as you expand into the levels of the adept, and the field begins to generate a great deal of energy, meaning you go into a higher spin. It's just like what you see with the top. If it spins faster, it spins even more on its point. And this creates a balance. And so thus, when there's a pole shift, you don't experience any what we would call aggressive, or in our terminology, negative actions during that time. You experience a pickup in the energy, because the energy fields are now closer together. Everything is lining up. So you have really at that point more of an ability to level up faster. So if you picture this as like if you were standing on the sun and you see all these planets spinning around in front of you, at a certain point, just like a video game, they're all going to line up. So if you run down the sun, that path right then, it's going to be a lot quicker than if you just jump on the first ball, let's say Mercury, and you spin around, then you jump on the second ball, and there's Venus, and if you're traveling that way. And so in certain tenses, we have to look at a lot of what's going on. There's what we call it the micro-macro approach, is that it's actually going on in the innerverse first. Mm-hmm. And so if you can start to find a way to mesh the two, find integers, common integers, or even for your own self, build a GUI, which is a GUI. This means basically you build a way over the top of this reality that allows you from a spiritual level to interpret what is going on the physical level, rather than just acting like the physical level has nothing to do with the spiritual level for yourself, which is, we know it's not true. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, everyone's been saying I'm so agitated. I don't understand. I need to go to the doctors. And I'm like, I'm not telling you not to go to the doctors, but consider this, and my advice to them is flow like water. Try to ground yourself, meditate, and look for the lessons that the cosmos are trying to tell you, and try to rise above it.
Right, because the other thing is that I can't fail to mention is that these lineups actually cause energy upheavals. That if you were looking at it as something that a spout in the ground, when the lineup happens, all of a sudden the spout would shoot out a certain kind of energy. Same thing that happens with earthquakes. When plates crack open, they release a certain kind of effervescent or ethereal energy that is a real energy. So it means it's alive. And that those energies, they need to be put into their place. Like they are trying to find, and we have to realize that, when energy is moving around, it has to go into a vessel. It's the same thing even with a male. He's a lot of energy. He's got to go into a vessel. I hate to make it even sexual at this point, but I don't. The reality is that it's all connected. Right. That there is a mating going on in the reality. As I say, sex is six. But this is not always a physical encounter. And I talked about it earlier, but it's about when your idea is meshed with my idea, and then it becomes a new idea.
It becomes a dance.
Exactly. Because, let's say, for instance, the gentleman builds the stove. He creates this stove. And then you create this cake. And then you put the cake in the stove, and then it comes out. And this is now a collaboration. And the two will not be able to function without the other. So there's so many of these relationships going on in this reality, it creates a web. And this web, which every adept knows about, it actually intermeshing over everyone and everything, that is the hive. That is the true definition of a hive. It actually exists. It's not something that's a figment of our imagination. This hive that links us together, even if we don't want to see it or we can't see it on the astral level, It is the reason why you have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. In most cases, most people have those appendages or are born with those appendages. That is the overall mass effect. So what happens is that this 2 arms, 2 legs, and the head, this phi template, actually is what is connecting us to each other. So that also equals, whether people realize it or not, where in reincarnation comes in, like how reincarnation even works. Like if you need to get in there, you need to get the technical data on reincarnation. You're going to see that it works because when a person leaves their vessel finally, when they leave this physical body, and then go into this field, and this field is a collection of all of the experiences and the data of this reality. Right. So the person is not going to lose or get lost. You see what I mean? Like people need to understand what's really going on. That whole web of information, all of the knowledge and all of what humanity really is what you're enveloped in. That is the womb, the hive.
The inner web.
Exactly. This is where the matrix, and this is lattice work. The easiest thing, because web, sometimes people say web, because know a lot about the languages and things. It's not the best word to use. I use lattice work. It sounds a lot better. It sounds like lace. Okay? And so what's happening is that there's more of a lace that mother is using in order to keep many of the life forms that are yet to emancipate or needing more incubation time into these frameworks so that they have the ability to learn through their experiences and through their different developments. And these experiences are actually our experiences as everything through multiple lifetimes, as long as we want to play the game. But where humanity is right now, many humans are on the planet now at such a vast state of intellect that they don't want to play games anymore. They're ready to move into the field where it's the depth field. It's like WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get.
I would say school's out.
Exactly.
School's out.
Taking training wheels off. And there's a responsibility that comes with this. And that's, of course, what the resistance after quest and all this is about, is the integral training that is necessary for an individual to get ready for self-substantiation. Now, the interesting part is that self-substantiation is actually going to occur for every species here that you're looking at. It's going to occur at a certain point. This is just as sure as your success. You will succeed at some point. The big question is, when will you succeed? And that's where we're at. That's the control point, because we are playing around, in a sense, with time. We are trying to reduce time. We want success faster. But this time we have our projections set correctly. Success is not just limited to some green talisman called money. Success is limited in that tense. Success becomes unlimited, because they always say the idea of success is based on who you're talking to. When success becomes unlimited, it is to eliminate one very simple thing: division.
Yes. I know you touched base on that earlier, but since we're on the topic, how do we function as a hive mind? Just to break it down real simple for everybody.
That basically the geometry of the human body is all giving off the same frequency. Just like if you were to have another object, let's say, for instance, when you look into cymatics, this is what really gives you the knowledge about this. But if you play 528 hertz, it creates a cornucopic field of convex triangles. So this geometry then of a convex triangle is connected to that frequency. And then thus it's making a sound, and it also has a color. Okay? So this means that sound, shape, and color are all intertwined. So if you look at the human being, they're an externalization of sound, shape,
Absolutely.
and color. The voice, the shape of the body, and then the color of the skin. And so playing, of course, that's the games of division. But the reality is playing. The reason why I use the term playing is because this is an orchestra. Everything is organic. So everything is playing with something else. And they're all playing in this harmonic tone that never repeats itself twice. In hearing the tone from this world, you will know that tone will never be played again. And many people this is the third year, that are musical geniuses, had tapped into that. They tapped into a field where it was never going to happen again. So the greatest thing was to enjoy it now. So if we're actually in a stage where we're already looking for the end or trying to go back to the past, that means that we're not present. So there's no way to tap in fully, put the tentacles in to what we're experiencing. Basically, come home, Alice, leave Wonderland, and come back into the real reality, because you're needed here. You're needed at your home. And then, of course, this home has a lot to do with being inside because being inside of self, uncomfortable inside of self, because there's nothing we can do for an external reality if we do not feel that within. You can't even build yourself up to it. How can you help other people? You don't even feel like getting up in the morning. So we talk about inner standing. And this, of course, is the method in which that has been taught in order to get a person to realize that they need to begin to cycle their energy. And this is the Taurus energy. Cycle the energy within to fully discover rather than without, trying to find God in the sky, trying to find hope in some man or some woman, trying to do that when all you're going to see is broken mirrors because there's a lot of what connects in this reality to the occult. There's a lot. We have so much, and this is the reality of this reality. We actually are in some kind of overwhelming state. And I cracked into this when I started realizing that the organs were producing all these endorphins like serotonin, melatonin. And then we got even deeper into it when we realized that the organs were connected to the chakras. And then we got to the height of it when we realized what bliss actually is. And bliss is when your body is calibrated to a point where all your organs are producing these liquids, serotonin, melatonin, all this, in the highest qualities because of your way of life. And then it mixes all those fluids together and then makes this, some call it the soma, some call it, different terms in history of what it's been called. But this liquid in itself, it's capable of anything. And so this is the potential of what we are. So you can see how when we're overwhelmed, meaning that when there's too many options, it's no longer just burgers and fries. It's, an entire French menu. We have a tendency to never focus on one specific thing so that we become masters. And this is the trick. And this kind of gets exactly into what I was thinking about 2 days ago. It was a deep introspection. And what was coming across was that, first of all, that I needed to stand up completely, and this is called inner stand, to remaining here in this reality for the children. And here was why. And there's always a reconfirmation of this. And this is what I was telling people about balance. It's like some people say, well, what, you weren't about the children before? Of course. But it's an everyday thing. Sometimes you just get hit in the head with it during one of these alignments, like, hey, remember the children. And then all of a sudden you get flashed with all this stuff going on. And what was shown to me is that when parents were using lots of dopamine, which you can go and you can get it on Wikipedia and see, dopamine is incredible to what it's doing to this world. And it also produces melanites, which, is even deeper level to the attraction of melanated people to dopamine. And how melanated people naturally produce dopamine. So in a sense, if a melanated person's using their powers wrong, they can be like a drug. Hello, Jay-Z and these Lil Wayne and these kind of individuals. But this gets so deep that it talks about when the parent is using dopamine, that it gets into the system. And then immediately from Wikipedia, because, they're still worshiping the owls and all that stuff, the whole massive state of consciousness came in and said, so what happens then is that the person is sending this message consistently, especially the mother and the father, if they're still together, into the future that I need to produce more dopamine. Because the child is them. It's only an upgraded version with them now in together, right? So then this child comes out, as you'll read what ADD is, it's producing high amounts of dopamine. So this kid is basically producing a drug in a high rate that actually taps one into the future. But this drug moves so fast that it is very reckless for a slow-moving past. And so then the voice came in again and said, so imagine how it is for a slow-moving spirituality, a slow-moving religion. That your world will be always conscrewed and conflicted and torqued down until its religious system, as you call it, but the system of belief increases itself and the old template is shed off and broken. That Shaddai's kingdom has to crumble. It is a shell, meaning that the old way of thinking has a lot to do with sitting around bowing down and no movement. And for a person who is dealing with a little bit too much dopamine, this is very difficult. So every time something comes across that says, well, you need 5-6 years before you become the yoga master, there's about 5 or 6 minutes, 5 or 6 days, at tops 5 or 6 months before someone that's moving that fast with those kind of chemicals running through them naturally. So that was just a window inside because I said, indeed, then something new must be created. I render myself to be a direct part of that. Then I sign in myself another agreement of a time span of being here on the planet assisting individuals, because that's what a bodhisattva is, to basically remain until all species ascend. You will close the door. Why? Because they're all you anyway. That's what we were tapping into is, and I know we have some other stuff to get into, but this is what I call code name Clearface. Clearface does not wear an identity, like a title, a label, a name, a word, a mark, a Mason's mark, a seal, a sign, none of that stuff. No clothes. CLOTHES, CLOSE. It's the same thing. So no clothes, so no titles. And then Clearface loads rapidly what it needs to do when actually encountered by its next stage on the path. This is what the child was doing. The child doesn't actually have an identity. Now, you get a chance then to be a mature child. That's what it is. Now you'll be able to go back through analyzing your experiences, but not from a level of how we're doing the analysis with our mind, which is taking us, of course, exactly, not with fear. Not in a way where it's taking us out of the zone, right? So that's what we're talking about.
Yes, well, it's interesting that the word bodhi means enlightenment, and the word sattva means being. So bodhisattva applies to one who is motivated by and seeks compassion and enlightenment for all sentient beings, both seen and unseen.
It was known as Bo for short. Mm-hmm. That Bo was the bridge in which everyone was riding across in order to get to their next stage.
Absolutely. Through generosity, ethics, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. I just love that word, bodhisattva.
I do too.
Yeah, it's a great word. Great song too.
I like that. I take that.
I know you do some work. You like to speak about the Kadman programmed world. Tell us about that.
For sure. And this is a big thing, because at the end of the day, even all of what I'm talking about, because if I go and explain aeons, how long is it going to take me to explain aeons? Maybe an aeon. So does everyone have time for me to sit down and explain the minuscule details of what went on in this reality? No. So what happens, though, is if someone is into hearing this explanation of different parts of the timeline, and they start getting all bent out of shape and, I don't know, I don't believe that, sometimes you have to call a time out and say, hey, man, woman, you know you're still in the Kadman world, right? You know you're actually, you don't got to get bent out of shape, because you have another vehicle inside of you that can exit that. Now, there's trainings for that now, but you used to be able to do that naturally, that if all of this, it never got too much for you. Like people say, oh man, I'm stressed out. This is too much for me. Are you kidding? Human? This stuff's like a joke across the galaxy. Something this simple as what's going on in this dimension becoming too much for us? Like that doesn't even make any sense. What happened to all those powers? So that gets into the powers and the abilities. And I may have to take a break for just a minute, because I kind of skipped my train of thought because you asked me the question, but ask me the question one more time.
For which question was that? I'm sorry.
That was the last question. The Kadman program world. Okay, here we go. Like people have to understand. I get super excited. But the Kadman program world is, if you look in the Kabbalah, actually look at the entire Jewish mysticism. Jewish meaning kind of like Jews, because the real Jews are black. They're Nagas, and they're from Sudan, Ethiopia, in that area where Cush is. And their story, which we'll get into a little bit later on in this show, about migrating from the south to the north, is actually what everyone was attempting to do at some point. But we need to realize, again, where all of this knowledge really came from. And that's why this knowledge came from what we're calling Upper Egypt. Okay? But then it wasn't called Upper Egypt. It was called Ta Meri. It was the real place of where the ocean, because most of that was still underwater, but there were kingdoms underwater. And I don't want to get into too much of this, but I guess this is an extraterrestrial radio show, so I'm sure it's not too much for them to handle. But okay, Earth is still underwater now. If people really want to understand, we're inside of a bubble, and there's the mist you're in right now. So let me just bring this homed in. So what the Kadman program world is that when the priests and the individuals that had the information and knowledge about how to construct the bodies, how to make vessels, and all this knowledge came from the sea. The sea is what we're now seeing today as our ocean. So all of the spiral force, which is creates what we call the pentagram. That's why you see the pentagram in a lot of sea animals. A lot of the spores, or all of the spores, that we call plants today, trees today, all were in the ocean first. And so that knowledge of being able to extract, kind of the process of how things are created in the ocean actually gives you the process of how to create things into the physical reality. Because that's where everything comes from in this planet. It came from the inside out, just like where we come from, right? We come from the inside of our mothers out. Mm-hmm. So the original people from this planet may not even have been the original people. They came from another planet and then arrived in the inside of this planet and then were birthed out of this planet at where we're calling the Nile Delta. Delta meaning an inverted triangle. Okay? So the first people were coming out right there. Okay? And what form they were in and what color they were is kind of clear, but you just have to get into the deeper levels of what they call now the occult. But anyway, that system of knowledge of how to do that, how to travel around, that creates alchemy, how to defy gravity, all these kind of things, was present there. And then once that knowledge spread from there, it was usurped, it was tried to be sold, there was all sorts of things going on. It was knowledge of power. So when it fell finally into the hands of those who hold the covenant today, it became what we call Adam Kadmon, who's an androgen. It's not a man. It's a half male, half female. But this diagram, which I'll be also showing tomorrow, and some people have seen it on the website, but this diagram is actually that of a full body, a full hermaphroditic body, with each part of the body, the nadis, the chakras, the acupuncture points, and all this, as different levels and stages where different things take place, almost like a processing plant. And that this template in itself, just like your body is a processing plant. Some people's like, wait a minute, extraterrestrials processing us? Look, you're the extraterrestrial, okay? Your body is processing other life forms. When you drink water, when you eat fruit, all these are other life forms, and you put them into a processor. And this processor is lined out just like the universe. So if you flip all that back around, you see what it is that the knowledge that we hold within is the most powerful. And that's why they have us looking outside for the truth, because we'll never find it there. So what the Kadmon program world is the outside truth. It is the exoteric knowledge of what goes on within. And this makes up all religions. It makes up the highest levels of religions. In fact, the highest levels of religions here on this world make up the feet of the Kadmon body. And that, behold, what was seen was several worlds all laid on top of each other like ziggurats, like pyramids themselves, all consisting of colors and frequencies of beings living, inhabiting, that were all connected, but were not aware of their connection because of the wall in between each dimension.
Yes.
And that what these walls are what we're calling the atmosphere, which is the clouds or the envelopments that are created from the fears of our mind. That's why everything is backed up in the cloud now. Back it up on the cloud. Back all your crap up in the sky. So then that creates a wall between you and the other world. And this wall actually becomes alive. This is the deeper thing. The clouds, and you'll see this in the dream world and the astral plane, and this is misty and all this mysticism around, and then weird things are happening in the mist. And these are all ideas and things floating around, eidolons and thought forms, many of which are deformed. Because the language that we're using, that we're thinking in, is not creating balance. The way that we're acting and the intentions that we're sending out these days is not sending balance. So the moralistic value of the human being, which is basically like its stock value in the universe, has gone down only in the degradation of our own species. Meaning, when we dividing is degradation. Okay? And so when we degrade, we lose rank. And so what our world is designed like, even though we're all the same, except for these little petty variations, we have a deity. Notice all these words begin with D, which is definitely a phallic representation. Actually, it's a phallic and feminine representation, because notice D contains a straight line and a curve. Okay? So everything can be encompassed there in the divicanic plane. So what happens is that this division that occurs is what keeps us from the realization of our connection. And everyone knows that. You're like, oh, yeah, I know, we're all connected, but how? And so that's, of course, the finishing of the explanation of the hive, of that connection now. And maybe it's not the finish of the explanation, because what was asked was, how do these shapes, so that would be the question, how do these shapes, this body, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, all connect us? And it's because we do still consider, like you have a baby, you consider that baby yours, that's your auntie, but if it didn't fit the form of phi, meaning that if she didn't have certain appendages, you wouldn't consider it as being a part of you. And so, like I said, this is what creates the division. So when you become a being that doesn't actually see, sound, shape, color, you actually become, and remember, this is a ladder up. I'm talking about some heavy stuff today, but you actually become what the meaning, because I do deep into etymology linguistics, the meaning for God was in the ancient language. So the word that was used for God in the ancient language, which was never uttered, it was ineffable. You could not pronounce it into a physical reality because it did things. It birthed things. It didn't come back void. And you're clear face in a tense, so your energy is free flowing, so you don't really have fears. Anything
that you're connected to everything.
Exactly, because anything that approaches you that looks crazy to you, you only look at it and say, but another part of me, and then it dissolves. And then you start realizing that what's actually bringing these things that look opposed to you and things that are different, and basically your quarrels, your conflicts, your enemies, your misfortune, and all this is your mind. The mind is actually creating all of this stuff on the fly. And because the mind is so strong, you only see this until you get in the astral plane, because in the astral plane, there's no time lag. So whatever you think, poof, it's there. And then all of a sudden, you're interacting with it. And then because it's a part of the hive, all of its data plugs right into its omnipresent persona. So this is why many people can go into the dream world and communicate with multiple different people and get all the data and extract all the data from them. And it's because they're still connected. Those beings are all still connected. It's about it's like tapping into a system that has only a certain level of security. And the level of security is called fear. And then once you don't have it, you bypass the security system. And this is why the riddle was within the Sphinx. On the astral plane, when you see the Sphinx, you see this huge line and crazy things, right? Whatever your mind will take you, wherever it'll take you.
Absolutely.
But if you're not afraid, then a door appears. And this be the door to yourself, a composite being. Now, the Sphinx was a composite being. It was fire, earth, wind, water, etc. It was a composite. It was a sign of what humans are when they're inside of physical planes. And so that's why it's funny if you think about it, because I remember I was reading something that said, hey, remember that most of the stuff that you're seeing, these pyramids and these Sphinx, this stuff, they just drop from space. And then because it holds so much meaning, if you drop a diamond from the sky, he becomes a fallen angel. It becomes anything that the interpreter that saw the action he's going to go all out with it. He's going to use the biggest words he or she has to explain it. You see what I mean? And we're causing this phenomena. And this is what you'll know about adepts and people that have a great deal of spiritual power. They get to a point where they can cause their own phenomena. Like anything they want to happen actually occurs. And then if your mind is too weak, and some of these individuals are dangerous, because if your mind is too weak, they can even plunge you into another world. This is where the Western mysticism doesn't even know about Eastern mysticism. Because in the Eastern mysticism, Dogen sects and these kind of sects, you can go in there and a Dogen master can plunge you into a whole nother world where you're not even having any access to your chakras. So it's just because that's what they do. And if that's what we did, meaning learning about spirituality day and night, because it's the only way to cross from the south to the north. Think about what's happening. This was another one, a jewel that was dropped earlier, even today. It was like, so if you didn't notice, everything migrates from the south to the north, because in the north, there's nothing there. So everyone that in the south, back in the ancient times, which you were calling the Indus Valley and those places where the temples of Angkor Wat were, when that was done and finished and the serpents had overrun the place, the malicious ones, once again, to say every serpent is bad is just as silly as saying every man is good. But the malicious serpents, as they show the Huras and the pulling the cord, the tug of war that was going on between the balance of good and evil, once this place was pretty much churned up, which is what you saw happen, that's the Great Flood, all of the people from the Indus Valley who were numerous, they were the first ones to obey the commandment, be fruitful and multiply, all migrated to the north. And that's where you got those Indian tribes that are the same people. Because the whole pun about Christopher Columbus calling the people he met Indian, all of these are riddles. India is Diana. So the reality is that the same people that are in Native Americans are also in India and also in Cambodia, because they were migrating to the north. Because this is why. In the South, there's a portal. And and this is not, I don't play the alien extraterrestrial games. But just like you have a anus and a few other holes in your body, the earth has them too. And in the South, there's one down there. And what comes out of there, it was already deemed that the standard person, even more advanced spiritual person, could not travel that way to exit. And this is the deep knowledge of how the earth, again, is a body. So it has these entry and exit points.
Are you speaking about Hollow Earth?
I'm speaking for sure about Hollow Earth, and Hollow Earth being the same toric field that we have in our body.
Absolutely.
That same kind of design, which places the center as the shell of the planet at only 15 miles, I believe, deep, and then the rest a hollow core, and then a centralized sun that's not hot. Okay, and then so this is